The year is 476 AD, and the Western Roman Empire is no more. The so-called Dark Ages had begun, as late antiquity and the early Middle Ages coalesced into centuries of violence, stagnation, and new states on the continent, permanently squabbling for power. But this was not the end for the Romans. To the east, the light of Constantinople shines with the glitter of gold as the Eastern Roman Empire, also known to us as the Byzantine Empire, carried on for another 1,000 years. And if there is one impressive thing about the coinage of the Byzantines, it is the very strong presence of gold coins in it. So today, let's glance over the history of the golden coinage of the Byzantine Empire, from some of its predecessors in the Roman Empire all the way to its final decline. Let's go! The eastern half of the Roman Empire was always noticeably wealthier and more urbanized than the old western half, if we exclude Rome itself. Its position right at the crossroads between the European continent, the Far East, and Egypt meant some of the main trade routes of the Old World passed through it. Adding up the high population and the tradition of urbanization dating centuries back to the Greeks resulted in a zone with enough population, wealth, and resources to withstand the turbulences of late antiquity. But to understand the relationship between the Byzantines and gold, we need to first take some steps back in time, to the height of the Roman Empire, where their monetary tradition came from. For most of Roman history, only one gold coin denomination served as the main high-density store of wealth, the aureus, a word that makes every Roman collector giggle with excitement. So it's just adequate that we take a look at an aureus first, as our first benchmark of what the spiritual predecessor of Byzantine gold coinage looked like. Generally weighing between 7 and 8 grams, this is an aureus struck by Emperor Septimius Severus during the year 193 AD at the Mint of Rome, to celebrate his victory over his opposition at the infamous Year of the Five Emperors. So on the obverse, we see the typical side-facing bust of the emperor, a typical pose that came all the way from the Hellenistic kings and their coin designs some 500 years prior, and would set the tone for another good 5 centuries of coinage going forward. The legends proclaim his position: Imperator Caesar Lucius Septimius Severus Pertinax Augustus. These were times of civil war, so the reverse features Virtus, or you could interpret it as Mars, so the incarnation of military prowess, wearing his helmet and holding a victory in his hands. The legends, Virtus Augusta Tribunicia Potestas Consul, sends a very clear message to anyone delirious enough to make themselves imagine themselves as emperor. Septimius is the man, he has the approval from the Senate, the blessing from the gods, and he is the undisputed new emperor. As the empire plunged into the crisis of the 3rd century and the monetary standard was thrown out of whack due to hyperinflation, it was decided that the entire system would be re-elaborated and reissued, where the aureus was eventually replaced by the solidus, a slightly lighter coin between 4 and 5 grams, that would become the most important coin from late antiquity and the early Middle Ages. So, under the reign of Theodosius, at the end of the 4th century, the empire would be permanently split into 2 halves, which would be ruled by his sons. Arcadius would rule what we would call the Byzantine East, and Honorius on the West. As we will see, in the beginning, the gold coinage did not deviate much from the earlier types. So first, let's take a look at a solidus struck under Emperor Honorius between 393 and 423 AD. For centuries, Rome kept a monopoly on the striking of gold, but this curious example was struck on Mediolanum, modern-day Milan, like up north in the Italian peninsula. Could this be so the coinage quickly reached the soldiers defending the frontier in Germania? Maybe a sign of a decline of Rome itself as a city and more imperial endeavors being sent to other more important cities. So on the obverse, we still see the side-facing portrait of the emperor, but this time We abandoned the realistic style Roman coins were famous for, replacing it for a more stylized image. The Romans were still capable of high-quality art, but the spread of the image of the emperor, something very important on earlier centuries, just wasn't really a priority anymore. What truly mattered was for whoever held this coin to know that there was a leader in charge, and he wasn't just some special individual, he was your owner. The legends start with Dominus Noster, our Lord, portraying the emperor nearly as someone divine. The rest of the legends read Honorius Pius Felix Augustus. And if the message was not clear enough, the reverse has an even more authoritarian tone. We see the emperor crushing a barbarian, something any Roman would be very satisfied with. Although I suspect this also meant the emperor could crush anyone, usurpers, as well as any rebellious figure. So the legends, Victoria Augustorum, the victory of the Augusti, referring to himself and his brother, shows that the two halves of the empire, although now separate entities, were still very much in touch with each other. The M and the D on the fields are the mint marks, Mediolanum, and the lower part of the coin, called the SRG, has the letters COMMOB, an abbreviation for Comitatus Obrisiacum, or pure gold refined at the imperial mint, as a statement of quality. Now, if we switch over to his brother, Arcadius, we can start to see some minor changes to the style of coinage that will only get more apparent as the years go by. This solidus was struck around the same time as the previous one, between 397 and 402, at the grand capital of Constantinople. But as we will see, the break between East and West politically will also show up numismatically. So on the obverse, we see a new style of coinage that will set the tone for future imperial portraiture. Although this is not the very first time Romans made coins with facing busts, this would become the new standard for the Byzantines. We see the bust of Arcadius wearing full military gear and ready for battle, with the legends very similar to those of his brother, Dominus Noster, Arcadius, Pius Felix Augustus. On the reverse, instead of an emperor crushing someone, we now see the incarnation of Constantinopolis, a beacon of prosperity, sitting on her throne with a ship on her feet. She's holding a scepter, a small victory, crowning her with a laurel wreath, and the legends, Concordia Augustorum, also making reference to the unity between the Eastern and the Western emperors. The lower part, the SRG, is slightly different as well. Instead of Comitatus Obrisiacum, we have an abbreviation of Constantinopolis Obrisiacum, or refined gold of Constantinople. Something curious about the late Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire in regards to their coinage is that they seem to have never fully re-established the full use of silver on coinage like on the early empire. A Roman citizen from the early empire might have rarely seen an aureus, but he definitely handled silver denarii multiple times. Romans from late antiquity had silver coins, but they were very few and far between, as the monetary standard consisted, on practical terms, of rare and a small quantity of gold coins and the mountain of copper or very, very low-grade bullion coins, making changes between them very complicated. This problem was solved partly with the adoption of gold fractions, something the empire had never seen. You would need thousands of the small copper coins of the time to get a single solidus, so fractions of 1/2 of a solidus, called a semisis, and 1/3 of a solidus, a tremisis, were struck. The monetary gap was still very significant between copper and gold, even for the small tremises, but the situation became somewhat more manageable. So let's start by taking a look at a semisis. At around 2.2 grams of very pure gold, this example from Emperor Constans II, struck between 641 and 668, reverts back to the old tradition of the side-facing bust of the emperor, basically because it was simple to make, although we already start to see some noticeable changes to the coin style. On the obverse, we see the emperor, now in a style much more attributable to the Middle Ages instead of a typical high-quality portrait of the Romans. The legends also change the title of the emperor slightly. It reads Dominus Noster, Constantinus, and if you are familiarized with the Roman coins, a PP typically reminds you of Pater Patriae, Father of the Nation, an honorific title given to Roman emperors. Byzantine emperors don't see themselves as fathers of their people. They see themselves as what they truly consider themselves to be, totalitarian kings. So now it stands for Perpetuus Augustus, Eternal Emperor. The reverse shows how by that time, all pagan iconography was pretty much gone from coinage. We see a simple cross over a globe, and the legends start becoming an amalgamation between Latin and Greek legends. Victoria Augusta, the victory of the emperor. We then move on to this adorable little guy. At slightly over 1 gram of pure gold, the Tremesis was enormously popular during the Dark Ages at the wide European continent as a good, recognizable store of wealth. It was not as incredibly valuable as the solidus, so it was a more manageable quantity of wealth. You could basically show up as far north as Scotland or Scandinavia, and merchants would very likely recognize and happily accept your Tremesis. This example, struck between 527 and 565 under the reign of Justinian I, also known as Justinian the Great, due to his incredible campaigns tried to reconquer and restore the Western Empire. On the obverse, we also see a side-facing portrait of the emperor, with very simplified traces, which is understandable. The engravers had less than 2 centimeters of diameter to work with. The legends follow the very typical design of late imperial coins. Dominus Noster, Justinianus, Perpetuus Augustus. What really fascinates me about this coin is actually the reverse. This coin was struck after Arcadius' Solidus, but before Constant II's Tremesis. So, between the more traditionally pagan iconography from Arcadius' coins and the fully Christian imagery of Constans. So the result is a mix between the two, or a middle point. For many, this reverse is just a typical goddess victory, but historians argue if these maybe are some of the very first depictions of the Christian angels on coins. It is a very easy association. You just need to look at a victory, maybe take the laurel wreath off her hand and give her a harp, and she pretty much becomes a typical Christian angel. As for the legends, they're exactly like their bigger cousins. Victoria Augustorum, although it is hard to find an example of a Tremesis with fully legible legends because, well, they're just so tiny. The solidus would retain its alloy quality and weight for centuries, which speaks volumes to the economic power of the Byzantines for most of the earlier and high Middle Ages, and we can illustrate that by this example, struck nearly half a millennia after the previous coin I've just shown you. So this solidus, struck under Constantine VII between 945 and 955, shows how the style changed drastically comparing to the previous coins. The 1000th anniversary of the birth of Christ was coming, and many considered this as a potential date for his return. So as an effort to show themselves as the most pious of nations, the spot reserved for the emperor's portrait was instead occupied by Christ, and they really put an effort on it. On the obverse, we see this marvelously sculpted bust of Christ looking at us, the observer, while the rest of Christianity on mainland Europe was striking very underwhelming coins at that time. The Byzantines really kept up a standard of quality on their coinage. We can also see him holding the Book of Gospels. The legends around Christ read, Ixus Christus Rex Regnatium, Jesus Christ, the King of all kings. This is one of my favorite Byzantine designs. So it is only on the reverse that we can find the monarch. We see Constantine VII and his successor, the future Emperor Romanus II, both wearing some very elaborate robes, holding together a patriarchal cross and the legends Constantinus e Romanus Augusti Basilis Romaion, translating to Constantinus and Romanus, emperors and kings of all the Romans. We're getting really close to the time of the Crusades, and interestingly, at that time, we'll start seeing a curious phenomena on the heraldry shields of European noble families. The appearance of dots, yellow and other colors. These are called bezants or Byzantiums, and are nothing more than the representation of Byzantine as well as Arab gold coins, which probably were part of the bountiful plunder many nobles carried back to Europe. They would certainly be surprised by the impressive gold coins they found in the region, compared to the tiny silver pieces that compose the majority of medieval monetary standards. The 11th century is a turning point for Byzantine numismatics. We're going to see a change in style, the abandonment of the solidus for other denominations, and the old problem of debasement as the Byzantines start going through difficulties. The tradition of featuring Christian deities on the obverse seems to have caught on, and would do so until the very end of the empire. Like on this example, struck under Michael VII between 1071 and 1078. From the color of the metal, we can see that the gold is beginning to lose some of its fineness. It is simply not that bright yellow anymore. So on the obverse of this coin, we see Holy Mary, presenting between her arms the young Christ. The legends make an allusion to the Mother of God. The reverse this time shows the royal couple, Michael and Maria, both wearing some gorgeously elaborate robes, holding an ornate cross, and the legends are very simple. They just tell the name of the ruling monarchs, Michael and Maria. By the end of the 12th century, this very curious phenomena happened to their coins, as they became cup-shaped. There are very theories as to why this happened, from very plausible ones like it made it much harder to counterfeit the coins, or that it would help stack the coins better, to some outlandish ones, like the sound it would make inside the purse would be more pronounced. So this very colorful coin was struck between 1185 and 1195 under Isaac II, arguably one of the worst Byzantine rulers, and we can see that by the quality of the alloy in this coin. A very acute debasement make this an electrum piece instead of a gold one. That's how you call an alloy poor on gold and rich in silver. It basically shows no gold hue in it. On the obverse, we see the enthroned image of the Virgin Mary, with the small abbreviations of Mother of God between her head. The reverse is very busy and full of information. I love it. It's an illustration of the medieval idea that the fact someone was king represented a direct instruction and determination by God himself. We see Isaac holding a cross, symbolizing his divine right to rule, and the akakia, which was a small roll of purple fabric, very expensive to make, with ashes or dirt inside of it. It symbolized the emperor's physical body, and served as a reminder that even the emperor, as powerful and rich as he was nothing but yet another mortal. He's being crowned by the Archangel Michael, as we can see by his halo and his wings. The legends describe the scene: Isaac, despot, and Michael. As the years passed and the Byzantine Empire slowly contracted, its coinage became less and less impressive, with the very last coins struck at the siege of Constantinople being nothing more than tiny silver coins, very crudely made. But fortunately, they left us a marvelous numismatic legacy, and I've just skimmed the surface. Byzantine numismatics is yet another gorgeous and underappreciated niche, and I recommend everyone interested in the time period give it a look. So our sponsors at Savoca Coins will be featuring all of these gorgeous coins featured in this video, as well as a series of other great pieces at their 104th silver auction on the 30th of May 2021. This will be a particularly rich auction on Byzantine and late imperial gold, so if you had interest on the time period, definitely have a look. Their silver auctions focus on higher quality pieces, so if you are looking for quality, for good condition, and for rarities, have a look at them. And it doesn't have to be only Byzantines. They have Greek, earlier Roman, medieval, modern, among other coins that will be up for sale. And if you are watching this video after the auction date, don't worry, just head over to savoca-coins.com and take a look, as another auction should definitely be happening soon. So now I want to hear from you collectors. Do you have any Byzantine coins you like? Maybe any gold coins you want to share with us? Let us know in the comment sections below. And if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. So I hope you all stay safe and see you soon.